Chapter 8. The Other Coast. A window in the capital, a wave in the east. The number on the slip in her hand was 3 digits long, and the board on the wall was 4 numbers behind it. And so Cindy Portillo did what she had taught herself to do in a lineup full of men twice her size. She breathed, and she watched the water she could not yet ride. Except there was no water here. There was a glass building in San Salvador with the air conditioning turned to a temperature no one in El Salvador kept their house, and a row of plastic chairs bolted to the floor so that no one could carry one closer to the window, and 100 other people holding 3-digit slips and trying not to look as though their whole year hung on the next 10 minutes. The forms in her folder had cost her a month of fishing money to file. The invitation underneath them was the only beautiful thing in the room. Mexi Log Fest 2019. Her name, and beside it, a country. She had come a long way to sit in this chair, farther than the 4-hour bus from San Miguel. She had come from a town that had never sent a girl to the water before her, on a coast the rest of the country forgot on purpose. When her number lit up, she walked to the window the way she walked to the nose of a longboard, light, certain, as though the thing beneath her feet were not about to drop away. To understand what was being decided at that window, you have to understand the 2 coasts of one small country. There is the West, or what everyone on a surfboard calls the West, though a mapmaker would call La Libertad the Central Coast, and save the true West for the quiet estuary beaches of Sonsonate. La Libertad, Punta Roca, the long famous right that the world flies in to ride, 20 minutes from the airport, lined with hotels and photographers and a national tourism slogan painted on the cliffs. That is where the cameras live. That is where Catherine Diaz was raised, and where by 2019 she had already done the impossible so many times that her country had started to take it for granted. And then there is the East. San Miguel, under the cone of the Chaparrastique volcano, dry and hard, the part of the map the war emptied and the peace never refilled, where the buses still leave full of the young and come back empty. The coast down there runs another 200 kilometers southeast of the surf hotels, past the delta of the Lempa, past the long black sand flats of El Cuco, all the way to where the Pacific finally gives up its violence and goes still in the Gulf of Fonseca, a quiet water shared with 2 other countries. The East keeps its treasures the way it keeps everything, out of sight. Its greatest treasure is a wave, Playa Las Flores, a cove tucked against the cliffs beside El Cuco, a right-hand point that wraps the headland in long, unbroken walls, one of the finest breaks in the whole eastern region, a wave in Sunzal's family, but with more muscle, forgiving enough for a first-point wave, sharp enough to reward a professional, a wave that on its best day will run 200 meters and ask for more, a wave that, had it been born near an airport instead of at the dead end of a bad road, would be on postcards. Instead, it broke for fishermen and for one girl from the nearby town who paddled out alone because there was no one else to paddle out with. She was the only female surfer her town had ever made. No older girl had gone before her. There was Cindy and the point in the Pacific, which had never once asked her what she was or where on the map she had been issued. Set her beside the girl from the West, and the shape of the country comes clear. In La Libertad, a girl who wanted the water was born onto a ladder. Siblings to chase into the white water, a brother to place a board beneath her feet, a coastline already full of people who could show her what the wave wanted. In the East, there was no ladder. There was no one in front of Cindy at all. She is what the same hunger looks like when it has to build its own rungs. For many, it's difficult to be a woman in El Salvador, she told the visiting Americans who came east, hunting empty waves, and found her on the nose of one. Women work and struggle to make a living. It's not easy most of the time. My dream is to be a longboard champion and represent El Salvador and Las Flores all of the time. She said it like a weather report. The Americans went home with the sentence in their notebooks and her silhouette on the wall behind their eyes, and back stateside they did the thing decent people do when a stranger's dream lodges in their chest. They made a plan. They would get Cindy to the Mexi Log Fest in 2019, the great congregation of longboarders on the Mexican Pacific, where her exact kind of surfing was not a novelty, but a faith. Her first contest in another country, her name and her flag on a foreign draw sheet. All she had to do was walk up to a window and convince a stranger to let her go. It is not a long conversation, the thing that happens at that window. That is its cruelty. A man on the dry side of the glass, a folder, a few questions that all circle one question they never quite say aloud. What brings you back? Where do you work? How much is in the account? Who pays for the trip? Each answer is a stone she sets on her side of the scale, and each one is too light because the scale was tipped before she sat down. The man cannot see Las Flores. He cannot see the wave that holds her more surely than any deed or mortgage ever could. He sees a young woman of modest means from the province the buses leave from, with no house in her name and no fat balance and no anchor he can read off a page, and the very things she had named out loud as her struggle, women work and struggle to make a living, are read back to her now not as honesty but as motive. She has too little, therefore she is suspected of wanting more. Therefore the file decides she might not come home to a country the rest of the world spends its life trying to flee. The word is denied, and it is over before the air conditioning has finished one cycle. No judge, no robe, no appeal, but a trial all the same, the verdict passed in under a minute on a life the judge will never know the first true thing about. She gathered her folder. She left the beautiful invitation inside it, useless now, an open door to a room she would not be allowed to enter. She walked out into the white heat of the capital and rode the long road back east, back down toward the only country that would have her, where the point at Las Flores was already breaking without her, and would break again tomorrow, and would not have understood the word denied if you had shouted it across the water. While Cindy rode the bus home, Catherine Diaz was somewhere over an ocean. She was the first female surfer ever to carry El Salvador's name onto the sport's great international stages, the one who went out ahead when there was no one ahead of her to follow. She qualified for and competed in the ISA World Surfing Games, the elite senior assembly of nations, standing in the parade of flags with her country's blue and white in her two hands in a place no Salvadoran woman had ever stood. She had risen through the ISA World Junior Championship as one of the few youth prospects anyone abroad had reason to watch. At home, she was simply the best, the top-ranked woman in the country year after year, the dominant force on the national surf circuit. In November of 2020, she took the national title once more in the Premier Women's Open division. She never lifted a world crown. She did not need to. The miracle was the crossing itself, the passport stamp, the boarding pass, the staggering ordinary fact of a girl from La Libertad walking out of a terminal in another hemisphere with a board bag on her shoulder, because the wave had carried her that far and, for her, the window had said yes. Hold the two of them in your hands at once, the same coast, the same ocean tugging at both their ankles. For one, the door swung open, for the other, it shut. There was no justice in which was which, and no logic either, only the accident of which end of a small country a girl was born on, and how much the world had decided her particular stretch of water was worth. The wave, meanwhile, kept its own counsel. A swell born off New Zealand arrives at Las Flores with no passport and is turned away by no one. It crosses every border on the planet and is stopped by none of them. The most lawless traveler we have is the sea, and the people who love it most are the ones most often ordered to stay where they are. Cindy went home and did the only thing the East has ever taught its people. She stayed, she trained, she waited, she did not stop. Two coasts, two women, one ocean that had never recognized a line between them. In 2019, the country was learning to celebrate one of its coasts and had not yet learned the other one's name. The water, which keeps no ledgers and honors no windows, went on sending waves to both.